Board of Aldermen work session is now called to order. First item on the agenda is the FY 2025 Employee Handbook Update discussion.
Good evening. If you remember at the board retreat, we talked about a paid family leave policy. This is going to be in conjunction with employees that use the federal FMLA, which provides 12 weeks of unpaid leave per 12 months for qualifying events. Currently, we have a shared leave program. So if an employee is completely exhausted of their accruals, they can apply for shared leave. So if they have a catastrophic event, they are able to ask for additional leave, and we allow employees to use their accruals when they're on FMLA. So during review of the proposed policy with our city attorney, John Reddick, he had some concerns with the implementation of a fully FMLA policy for paid leave, just because if anything's added to FMLA, that would also need to be covered by this policy. So it could be changing just based on federal law for the paid leave portion. Obviously, we would have to accept any FMLA leave based on the current federal guidelines. So we have tailored this leave back a little bit to only be for parental leave. We kept it at 6 weeks, and I did include in the staff report a survey that I sent to 30 surrounding organizations. We got 10 responses that they had paid leave. It varied from 4 weeks all the way to a fully paid 12 weeks for the birth or adoption of a child. So it'd be for either parent, and it would run concurrently with FMLA specifically for the birth or adoption of a child. I wanted to get your feedback on this type of policy. It would only be, again, the paid parental leave, nothing else. And then your recommendation on the amount of weeks. So if you'd like to do more than 6, we talked about 6 at the board retreat. Just comparatively with other organizations, 8 weeks might be more competitive with the current market. So just looking for feedback so we can bring this for formal review at the employee handbook.
I have a question, Gina.
Mhm.
I see that it's.
Is your mic on?
Oh, yeah, it's on. Here, let me get a little closer here. There you go, testing. All right. I see that other cities and for example, El Dorado broke down the difference between the parent that's having the child and the spouse or significant other. And that was kind of unique. Is that across the board like that, or is it?
I would say that's the only one that I saw that had it split like that. Most do both parents with the same amount of weeks.
I think my recommendation when I saw that, I thought that was a good practice right there, just because I don't know, I think the person having the child to heal and get better and everything else, it seems to me like needed the most time off, and then the other parent help. But that's just my thoughts. I'm sure the rest of the board has other ideas. The time, I think of 4 weeks for the parent with having a child might want to raise that and raise the other one too as well. But I don't know what other people think here.
I'm good with the 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
I like 6 weeks across the board for both parents. I respectfully disagree and would like both parents to be able to be home with the kid for that time.
I concur with Alderman Shipley.
I agree as well. Both.
6 weeks
Okay.
across the board.
The final policy when we do the employee handbook approvals for feedback on that. So, all right, thank you.
Rick, you ready?
The mouse.
I know we originally gave you like an hour, but now you get like 13 minutes, so.
I can do it.
Just don't discuss schedule of fees tonight. You're good.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and board members. Tonight I'm going to talk about a few compensation scenarios. This year we did a focus on market conditions. The city needs to remain competitive to recruit and retain our staff. So that was a big focus this year, was looking at the market.
Click into the presentation. Should be.
And get the mouse to move. There it goes. All right, during the retreat, we brought to you the first two scenarios. Based on our research, we did scenario one, which was an increase of 6% for all employees. Scenario two was a 6% increase of frontline employees and 8% for directors. After discussion at the retreat, we got a little bit of guidance, and we also added 3 more scenarios. They will be an 8% increase for all employees, an 8% increase for directors, and 10% for frontline employees, and then a 10% increase for all employees. Looks like that went too far. All right. First off, we made some assumptions here. Non-supervisory sworn police officers are set by the FOP union terms. The sergeants are still in discussion, so those numbers are kind of left out at this point. Frontline employees, all employees other than director, a new base for the addition of assistant city clerk pay, a reclassification for one Parks and Recs position, an additional Parks and Recs maintenance worker position, and we have health premiums at a 15% increase and workers' compensation projected at a 9% increase. This slide is what you saw at the retreat. We have the scenario one with the 6% increase for all, and scenario two at 6% for frontline, 8% for directors. Nothing has changed. This is the exact same slide from the retreat. So if we look at that base, it's at 4.4. Now I'm going to switch to the next slide here. If I can get it going one slide at a time. We've had a few changes between the retreat and now. We had an update to the benefits cost. People changed their benefits at certain times, which this is kind of an ongoing process. So at one point we'll just call it good and have to stick with those numbers. Also, during the benefits review, we also changed, there's 2 open positions at Parks and Recs. Historically, we've kind of left the benefit cost for like medical at 0 or one of the low levels. We've changed that to be a little more conservative. We've selected one of the higher level medical benefits. Also in here is a new base for that one development employee. And this is a direct result. As you remember, we have the new development employee plan that we're implementing. This is a direct result of that plan in action. The guy moving up in his salary range. Also, for the development employees, we also have the assistant city clerk pay. Then we have a reclassification for the one Parks and Rec position and the new position that we discussed at the retreat. That new position, as you can see, that increase that we had since the retreat for Parks and Recs is at 90,000. That new position does add just over 63,000 to that line item. Here is a snapshot of all of the compensation scenarios put together. So our new base is just over 4.5 million. We had the 6%, the 6 and 8, the 8% based on the retreat, as well as the 8% for directors and 10% for frontline. And then also the 10% for all employees. So as you can see, once we hit 6%, going to 10% for all employees, we are adding just right at $100,000. We will go over these slides here real quickly. This is kind of a repeat from the retreat as well. In this scenario, we have a few operating expenses that are given, have to stay in there. First off, we have the vehicle and equipment replacement fund. This is with enterprise lease. We have our new IT services through Allo. That increased us 39,000 this year going forward. We have the Smiths Fork Park lease payments and police overtime. And police overtime will be monitored going forward as well as changes happen. Again, a couple another slide from the retreat. All of these capital projects have been added. We did remove the neighborhood beautification grant. Here's the next slide of additional items that are included in these scenarios. This mouse does not like me today. Based on the retreat, we've also added all of the items listed on this slide. I will note that the campground road repair, we did put in at 150,000. We went to the top end number. And we also added on the utility side, the wet well wizard. Is not agreeing with me today. All right, here is a snapshot of the financial numbers if we did no change to the compensation. I'm going to go through the next 15 slides relatively quick. I will do each scenario with the financial numbers and then show you a couple charts. And the third chart or the third slide for each scenario will show where we hit our reserve, where we think we will start going below reserve. I want to make sure that everybody understands we have not added revenue to this. So more than likely the reserve, hitting that reserve will be pushed out a year or two. Here's that first slide for the no change to compensation. You have the expenditures and revenues, and then the ending fund balance down at the bottom there. Here is the slide I was just mentioning with the reserve balance thrown in it. At no change to compensation, with very little focus on revenues, we would not hit the reserve. At 6%, those are the financial numbers, the revenue and expenses, ending fund balance. And at 6%, roughly at the beginning of 2027, we would hit the reserve balance. And again, that's without a good focus on the revenue numbers. Next up is the 6% frontline, 8% directors. I'm going to go to that third slide. We will see that very, very close to the previous one. The 8% directors, since there is just a handful of directors, does not move this needle very much. 8% for all employees. And you'll see here, starting roughly at the end of 2026, we would hit that reserve balance. This is 8% directors, 10% frontline. You will see ever so slightly that time frame of hitting the reserve is hitting just a little bit sooner in 2026. I apologize for my mouse control tonight because it is not. Last scenario is the 10%. And again, just right towards the middle of 2026, we would hit that reserve. And again, just please keep in mind, the revenue numbers are not calculated too much into this. We do have the revenues increasing it slightly, but there's not a good look at the revenues while doing this. These next couple slides, I'll slow down a little bit on. This gives the comparison of each scenario. And as you will see here, starting with the base and no change, that total expense line increases to 10%, about 263,000. And again, just at that first step of 6%, that increase was 163,000. This is the slide that is a good one to at least see a visual on. We have the first, on the first side, the left side, we have the no change, the 6% and the 6% to frontline and 8% to directors. And then on the right-hand side is the result from the retreat. As you can see, that doesn't change very much. Once we get up to 8%, that does not change much. 8% director, 10% frontline, as well as 10% for all. That was it.
Rick, if you could provide some background, we as a board kind of heard it through a retreat. I just kind of would reiterate, we are behind other municipalities. It's not a municipality against a municipality. It's obviously providing a competitive wage for our folks. Can you just overall, just for our folks who are listening in and are here, kind of what you told us in just a very short synopsis of it's going to be a challenge every year, but we've got to go somewhere with it.
It will be a challenge. Right now, we have some problems recruiting as well as retaining. So, and that is, like we said, is just the market. Other municipalities around us we got caught up a couple years ago fell just a little bit behind because everybody else did their study after us. So we are now catching up a little bit in the market. Again, salaries is a hard one because salaries is compounding. So we do feel the need to increase at a decent amount. A lot of our competitors are looking at 6, 7, 8, 9% at this point. With us being just a little behind, if we do not do in that range, we will be that much more behind and have that much harder to recruit as well as retain.
Thank you, Rick. And Rick, thank you for putting this together too. I think the last slide is really beneficial for me. And I know when we talked at the retreat, I was really really on board with the getting the employees more than the frontline employees, I guess, more than the managers. And I still feel that way. However, after we review some of this and see where we're going, I mean, I think we need to go back and look at the funded items and unfunded items and maybe make some difficult decisions there in order to keep the compensation competitive. I mean, like you said, we need to focus on revenue because right now the projection is looking like, an hour and a half to bankruptcy. We already moved and I should say bankruptcy, but below the 25%. We already moved the bar from 40% of our reserve to 25%. Since I've been here, now we're going projected an hour and a half, a year and a half away from projecting from hitting that line. So I think maybe as a board we should go back and look at some other areas of opportunity to take, painful areas of opportunity to take cuts on versus the employees, cutting the employees and not having them, right?
Right. And in the next couple meetings, we will be looking at fees. And then we'll be able to start incorporating a little bit more of the revenue outlook as well, which should make this look quite a bit better.
One thing to jump
Thank
in
you.
on what Rick said, and I know Alderman Wilson is trying to get in. One comment to Rick's comment about looking at revenues. We want to get this information in front of you all. We're looking for direction. We don't need final decisions tonight, obviously. As Alderman Russell, you pointed out, there are a lot of additions here, and the baseline numbers do increase, as Rick outlined, over what you saw in the retreat, in part because this includes all of those added positions that we've talked about as well. Numbers have gone up some, but to Rick's point as well, as we go through on an annual basis with the budget, on a quarterly basis, we review where we are revenues and expenditure wise. The information that we presented right just prior to the retreat was our 6-month information. And we will in August have an update for our third quarter. We anticipate, given some of we were just having a conversation with Jack today, some of the development costs, development fees associated with some of the development that are going on in town. Those fees have come in and they're coming in higher than what we thought. We will review. We don't have what is today. We haven't even had a conversation. Our sales tax information comes in monthly. About last week, we've not sat down and talked about any of that, sales and use tax. So Rick and Gina and I and staff will be looking at where those revenues are to bring forward to you all and continuing to look at those trends. We're hopeful that we'll be able to tweak those up some as well based on consumer confidence or what we may have going on there. And as Rick indicated, we'll be bringing forward recommendations with regard to user fees. We've done a real good analysis of our costs for providing services, and in areas where we may think we need to reduce those costs for folks. Gotta think somebody if it. Thank you, Linda, for silencing that. We've got some areas where we may make recommendations for slight changes to our fees there. That's not going to make a huge difference, but all of those pieces come into consideration in that as well.
What I wanted to say was, I remember last year at the retreat, we were looking at more like on that last page of hitting the reserve within the next year or two.
By
and
the
it
end of
totally
20
changed by
or
the end, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
we've had, as we discussed at the retreat, and one of the things that has happened, and we all know that interest rates have gone up significantly. That has impacted our budget significantly. We have significantly more revenues than what we had, and our fund balance is in a far better position than it was. If we were looking at these numbers a year ago today, we would have already been out of that fund balance. So this is, it's a constant target. Kind of like Rick was saying, as we have employees, when we have turnover, we budget a certain amount, or we may have a certain amount plugged in for benefits, but then somebody moves, everything's a moving target, obviously. And so we want to get you all as much information as possible on that as well.
I think the other thing I wanted to share, like at the retreat, we were talking about this and the question was asked of Rick, what he's seen as far as the total of general fund revenue, let's say, or the general fund budget, what percent of that went to employees and where we were at in there, and we learned that we were below. So it's, and we talked about, it's just a vicious cycle that goes round and round and round about how do you stay competitive and still take care of all your other financial needs that the city needs. It's a constant battle.
Well, and it's that balance then as well. And as Rick said in answer to Alderman Hartman's question earlier, you know, we did a compensation and classification study in 2021. And just as we finished ours and got the results back, many of the communities that we compete with for staff initiated their studies. So they've made changes and tweaked and brought the bar up. One of the communities that was doing a compensation study at the exact same time we did, because the firm that we were using was doing the work for us and one other community in addition to this, the third community, they are already revamping theirs with the consultant. Gina, the information she provided at the retreat was our internal look at that. And Alderman Hartman noted that the information that you all had for the retreat showed pay grade by pay grade how our ranges compare at the minimum, midpoint, and maximum with that market. And there are some areas where we are very competitive. There are some areas where we are very far behind. And there are some where we're, you know, right in there. But we constantly have to look at that in recruiting and then retaining those employees.
I just want to say thank you, Rick. I really appreciated the graphs and the charts and everything. They're very user-friendly and easy to read. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Rick? Thank
Mayor
you.
Cynthia, you're looking for direction from the board then, or on a percentage, is that?
It would be great if we could have something that we could plug in to bring forward to you all. Obviously, we do not have to adopt the budget this week, next week, or in the next month or so. So if you could provide us some direction of how you would like us to move forward so we can plug that in and see once we take the additional look at revenue and moving forward with what would be a desired scenario for the governing body. And we can then in August have those conversations of where that puts us, and we can start having those conversations that we might need, whether we have to start looking at reducing or.
I kind of like the 6 or 8% across the board.
There's not much difference there.
No,
Mm-mm.
no.
One thing I do want to point out also, we didn't include in the slides here, and if you'll recall at the retreat, we did talk about in the past as we've increased salaries, we've increased ranges at the same rate. Staff is recommending that we increase the increases to employees at one level and then the increase to the ranges slightly less so employees can continue to move through those ranges. So we had initially, when we had provided the information on 6 and 8%, we recommended a 4% increase to those ranges to keep us in the market. If so, we would basically what we would look at is whatever you all come up with, we would recommend that 2% differential. So if you look at 6% increase, we look at 4% adjustment to ranges, 8, we look at 6.
I think that we were also that we made the decision to look at not just trying to catch up, right, but to get a little bit ahead so we won't have to keep chasing, right? Which, I mean, it's
I think
kind
you're
of
gonna have to do a significant increase to get ahead.
you know what I mean? I mean,
6 and 8% will only keep us in the game. I don't know that it gets us ahead.
I mean, I guess either way, if we do get ahead, right, then I imagine the other municipalities are just
Well,
gonna
there's
jump
that too.
ahead as
That's-
well,
That's
so.
correct. Yeah. It's,
So maybe
it is a
8%
hard.
then.
So I like the 10% for the front line and 8% for the directors. I'm still on that one.
Yeah, no, I think kind of the reasoning behind that, again, for the folks is that our directors are important. Traditionally, they're a little bit higher salary. Our front line is just as important. They're a little bit lower, so we're trying to bring them up and still be fair and equitable to our directors.
Right.
And so I'm with Alderman Kabowski. I do like the 8% directors, 10% frontline.
Am I correct in looking at the numbers, or frontline people are like 2.7% behind the average, and then our directors are 17.9% behind?
Mhm.
So it
Mhm.
seems like the directors are needing a little bit more of a jump they're just playing catch up because we're not working ahead at all in that department. They're significantly behind other municipalities. So I would recommend having that jump up for the directors versus the front line.
I thought they were right at 7%. Maybe I misread that. I thought they were right at 7% below 17.
It's,
No.
I'm looking at,
No, the information from the retreat did, as we had discussed, there was a significant, the largest area of disparity was in the higher pay ranges.
that is why.
We had some in the low pay ranges as well. In the middle, we were kind of more sweet.
That's why at the retreat, we brought to you the 6% frontline, 8% directors.
I guess, can we ask for another chart then and change it to 10% directors and 8% frontline? Just flip that.
Just flip it.
Is that direction you want to give for the draft budget?
Yeah,
Is that a motion?
yeah, I make a motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of 10 for directors and 8 for frontline, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All opposed, say no.
No,
Motion carries. You have your direction.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn work session.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Don't go anywhere because we're starting the next one as soon as Linda says go.